In today's video, I'm finally going to start my series on the power of now. Okay, got this book right here. I'm going to be keeping it very, very casual, and I just want to be breaking this book down even simpler, in simpler terms, video by video. So the reason I picked this book as the first book that I'm going to do a breakdown of is because the truth is spoken so simply in this book. Yet it's not hiding behind any fancy language or any sort of fancy concepts that you're going to have to use your mind to decipher. Okay? If you truly pick up the pointers that are in this book, they will point you directly to the beingness that the entire book is really based on, your true self. So again, just going to keep it very casual. So let's get right into it. I want to just, so I'll start by chapter. I'm going to just be breaking down chapter 1 today. I don't even know if I'm going to get through chapter 1 itself, but what I'll do is I've taken, certain notes and I've underlined certain things while I have read this book. So the things that I have underlined, I will basically be going over those things, the things that really connected with me deeply. I read this book once very, very early on in my spiritual journey when I was just getting started. It was one of the first books that I read, and at that time it definitely connected with me and I thought it was amazing. But now, after going way deeper in the past 3 years or so, getting into Sri Ramana Maharishi's teachings, practicing self-inquiry and really going deeper and deeper and deeper, now that I went back and revisited this book, I am resonating with it at a whole different depth, understanding things on an experiential level that I did not grasp before. Okay, so I'll try to bring my own experience into the teachings and how I relate to this book, and hopefully that will help spark something in you. All right, so let's get started with chapter 1. You are not your mind. And I love that that's the first chapter. That's actually the whole thing now that the Personal Mastery Quest channel is all based on. And I want to start with the first thing that I underlined in this chapter, which is a quote by Eckhart, right? He said, "Those who have not found their true wealth, which is the radiant joy of being and the deep, unshakable peace that comes with it, are beggars, even if they have great material wealth." And that's such a powerful way to open up this book, because that's basically telling you that all the things that we work so hard to achieve and create and we chase in the material realm, no matter how much we accumulate, no matter how much you manifest, as long as you have not discovered your being, you have not discovered your true self, and you still are mind identified, if that's the case, then you will always suffer. If that's the case, you are still a beggar, no matter how much material wealth you have accumulated and secured for yourself. So with this statement, right, Eckhart is comparing the great material wealth which we all salivate over, obsess over, versus what is already us, what is already within. Yet it is a much greater treasure than anything that you could accumulate outside. So that's almost like a hint that is kind of opening you up to and making you curious about what is this beingness that comes with the joy, the happiness, the sense of love, peace. So he said the word enlightenment conjures up the idea of some superhuman accomplishment. And the ego likes to keep it that way, right? Because the ego wants it to be some sort of accomplishment that lies in the future. But it is simply your natural state of felt oneness with being. And we'll get into that in just a second. He says, the inability to feel this connectedness, right, this oneness of being, gives rise to the illusion of separation, where you are separate from the world around you. Okay, then you perceive yourself as an isolated fragment. Okay, and because you perceive yourself as an isolated fragment, separate from source and all that is what gives rise to fear, anxiety, and suffering. So enlightenment, self-realization, and this is something that I always say on this channel, is not a superhuman accomplishment. It is not something that is outside of you right now. It is not something that has to be attained or achieved. It is simply your own recognition of the presence which is illuminating this moment. Not just recognizing that presence, but recognizing that presence to be your actual self. Recognizing that the mind and the belief systems and the identity, which are all mind, right? That all these identifications that we are used to calling myself, right? When when you say I, when you say me, mine, you're always referring to this body and this mind. Mind meaning these thoughts, right? These sorts of belief systems, these identities. That is the extent to which we know ourselves. And if that is the case, then we remain identified as this little isolated fragment in a huge separate world. And the more we feel separate, right, the more we are mind identified, the more we feel that as fear. Separation equals fear. Okay? Now, the more that we learn to recognize that I cannot be this body because I remain stable, I observe the body come and go, constantly changing into different shapes and forms. Right? The body you have today is not nearly the body that you had 10 years ago versus when you were a child. So the body has constantly changed. There is something within that is not changing, but it is perceiving the body to change. That is me. So what is that? Is it the mind? But the mind itself is constantly observed to change. All your thoughts, right? It's pretty easy. And you can confirm from me right now that your thoughts come and go. They are constantly changing. So now let's get deeper, right? Beliefs. The beliefs you hold today are not the beliefs at all that you held 5 years ago or 10 years ago or when you were a child. Even your belief systems are constantly changing. So is it the personality then? By the way, all of this is mind. Is it then your personality? But your personality itself, if we're doing a deeper dive, something is observing even the countless personalities to change. I feel like I'm this personality today. I used to be this personality, right? I'm kind of shy today. I'm kind of more reserved today, but I used to be more outgoing. I used to be funny. I used to care about so you're like, I'm observing all of these different personalities too, different identities. So then what is that deeper essence which is observing all of this mind and body stuff to change? That is the beingness that Eckhart is pointing us to. That beingness is not outside of you or something that has to be attained. That beingness is itself closer than you, than even mind, than even body. That beingness is essentially what we are. And until we know that and abide in that and live from that, no matter how much material wealth we accumulate, we will still feel fearful of losing it or whatever happens. And we are still beggars. The more we feel this oneness, the more we recognize that beingness, the more we feel it as love. Okay, so oneness, felt oneness equals love. Felt separation equals fear. The more mind identified we are, the more we live in a fearful and anxious state, the more at one with being you feel, the more your sense of self is identified with the awareness which illuminates even the thoughts, the knower of the thinker and the body and the circumstances. The more we are identified in our true position as self, the more the innate quality of the self, which is love, peace, happiness, is felt right here and now. And that itself is enlightenment, to know yourself as what you actually are. rather than the idea that you have of yourself. He says the being is the eternal, ever-present one life beyond the myriad forms of life that are subject to birth and death, as I just said, right? So this beingness, this sense of presence, is eternal. It is constant, it is changeless, and it is that which is without quality. It does not have a beginning or end. It cannot be harmed or damaged. It has no form, it has no quality. Therefore, it is eternal. And it is the one that knows all that is subject to birth and death and change and growth and decay. The constant movement. Everything that you perceive comes and goes, like images on a screen. Being is aware of that. Being can be felt, but it can never be understood mentally. To regain awareness of being and to abide in the state of feeling realization is enlightenment. So even in the self-inquiry teachings that I'm, always teaching on this channel, it is a tendency, even in meditation, to really get mental with it. Or even when you hear this beingness stuff and you kind of try to think about it or try to figure it out. It is something that can never be thought of. It can never be conceptualized. It can never be figured out. It is only something that can be given into. What you need to give up is the mind. In this moment, if you set the mind aside, beingness, the recognition of beingness will arise. And that is exactly what we do with our meditation practices, right? With our self-inquiry practice. It is to let go of believing in the mind for a few moments at a time to recognize the innate, inherent presence that is always here. So if a person who's a beginner to meditation comes on in my program, I really have them focus on simply, giving them the perfect pointers to quiet their mind so that they can pause the mind so that they can realize that when there is no mind here, I still am. There's still something here. When nothing remains, even a sense of me is gone, something still remains, this presence. So that is the first, right? The first step to recognizing that presence is me is first just recognizing that there is a presence. This presence goes unnoticed if we constantly remain completely occupied by mind. If mind is all we know and if mind is always on, then this beingness, this presence will go unnoticed. So the whole point of meditation, especially in the beginner forms of meditation, right? Just like focusing on the breath and so on and so forth. Obviously, those pointers can become a little more refined. And I always do my best to refine them as much as possible. Those pointers are really there for you to just recognize that there is a presence, which is knowing this experience. So here's the thing. You can either know mind, right? You can know yourself as mind, or you can know yourself as that presence. In the beginning stages, when we have to kind of unmix our sense of self from mind, it is definitely required to actually stop the mind again and again and again. Not by force, but by simply bringing our attention into the now and just being present. You don't have to stop mind by force. You can't fight against the mind, right? Otherwise, the mind will only grow. It is simply a turning of your attention into the now, where thought cannot exist. Thought, by definition, is future and past. The now is free of thought. It is free of story. It is free of identity, right? It is free of Sunny, his past, his future, everything. So the now is also the portal to being. The now is, you can say, the being. The now and awareness, being, all different words for just the same thing. So that is why what we speak of can never be mentally grasped, conceptualized. Concepts and words can hope to point to it, but they can never hope to know it. Only being can know being. Mind can think of being, can try to conceptualize being, but it can never understand or know being. Only you, being, awareness, can know being, awareness. And again, this awareness, it is your very essence, and it is immediately accessible to you as the feeling of your own presence, the realization, I am. Just that natural recognition that I exist. I am. Even the word I, it is referring to that. Right now, this I may be identified at the body-mind level. However, in truth, what I is really felt as in this body, in this experience, is that awareness, which you already are. It is immediately accessible to you the moment you recognize I am. And recognize that how the moment you actually come to this recognition, just this experience of I am aware. In that moment, there is no thought. Thought may come in instantly right after, but in that moment, there is no thought. Now, this is what you must become more interested in. So in the section of the question, he said, now what is the greatest obstacle to experiencing this reality? Not to be able to stop thinking is a dreadful affliction, Eckhart said. He said the greatest obstacle is identification with your mind, right, which causes thought to become compulsive. And not to be able to stop thinking is a dreadful affliction, but we don't realize this because everybody is suffering from it. So the entire conditioning that you have received, what you consider to be normal, is this constant thinking. And you have been sort of conditioned into this way of living where you rely on thought to live, or it is believed so. Ultimately, still, the constant thinking you're doing is not controlling your life. You believe that it is needed to control your life, but everything is happening spontaneously of its own. But the thought activity is constant, and it is believed in right now. And this constant thought activity is the biggest thing that is holding you back from recognizing your own natural presence that never leaves, that is always here, always. You can think of it like this. This constant thinking is a blanket covering your presence. If you're just constantly in mind, all that your attention will ever be occupied with is these thoughts. It will never actually relax into what is under the blanket. You can't even turn your attention to being. You simply have to relax, giving your attention to anything, any thought. Therefore, meditation. Therefore, coming to the now. So, identification with mind, when you believe that I am mind, nobody actually says this out loud, but the way we live, we believe we are mind, right? This mental identity, this past, this history, this future, these desires, these resistances. When you are identified with mind, the mind creates this need to compulsively think, which gives you a greater sense of self, who I am, what my life is, what do I got to do to achieve, and all that stuff. So this becomes the cloud over the bright blue sky that is always eternally present. And the more you are identified with mind, right, the deeper you are just constantly in mind, the thicker the layer of cloud becomes. Starts off with mind, then starts with another layer of judgments, labels, interpretations, fears, insecurities, all just clouds covering your innate, beautiful blue sky, your natural state. Now, Eckhart further goes on to say that, the mind is a superb instrument. We're not trying to, make the mind out to be bad. But identification with mind is going to lead to destructive patterns, to dysfunction. And in the state that we are identified with mind, right, you're not actually using your mind. It is using you. You believe that you are your mind. This is the delusion. The instrument has taken you over. And many people say, "Oh yeah, I'm not identified with mind. I'm spiritual, so I know I'm not my thoughts." So Eckhart says this, if you don't believe that you're identified with mind, he said, "Let me ask you this. Can you be free of your mind whenever you want to? Have you found the off button?" So he says you are unconsciously identified with it, so you don't even know that you are its slave. So not knowing or not actually accepting that I am identified with mind is the first step. Is the thing that's actually holding you back. And actually acknowledging it is the first step to being free of this mind identification. The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not the possessing entity, the thinker. Knowing this enables you to observe the entity. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. You then begin to realize there is a vast realm of intelligence beyond thought, and thought is only a tiny aspect of that intelligence. You also realize that all the things that truly matter, beauty, love, creativity, joy, inner peace, arise from beyond the mind. You begin to awaken. So our main you can say a goal, I don't like to use that sort of terminology, but the goal is to recognize that I am not the thinker of my thoughts, but rather the watcher of even the thinker. So like when we think, instantly by simply engaging with thoughts, there is a sense that arises that I am the thinker of this thought. And because we are identified at that level of the thinker of thoughts, that is what is called as identification with mind. That is what is felt as I am this mind. That is what is felt as I am choosing and thinking these thoughts. But that's not true. First of all, thoughts are just happening. And second, the thinker of thoughts is also just another thought. This recognition will free you, the one that is observing even the thinker and the thought itself, which are both mind. Who are you? What are you that observes even the thinker? One moment the thinker is a pleasant thinker of happy thoughts. The other moment the thinker completely changes of sad thoughts and angry thoughts. This thinker is not stable. It is actually observed in awareness. It is observed by what? Are you already not prior to the thinker, behind the thinker, that you can know the thinker, constantly change? By the way, if you have not yet picked up already, the thinker is what we call the ego. But it itself is a thought. To just give you a simple example, you can have 5 thoughts. A 6th thought will arise that is not an actual thought. It's a special thought. It's not a regular thought, it's a special thought. This is what we call the I thought. This thought arises and claims that it was thinking the other thoughts. And then 5 thoughts pass, and then this one arises again that claims that I was thinking the other thoughts. This one is the one we have to catch and expose, because it is in this one that your entire mental identity lies. It is in this one where all the suffering, all the fear, all the anxiety, all the pressures, everything is being created from this one. And catching this one and recognizing it to not be me, recognizing it to just be simply another thought which arises, is the beginning of freedom. So that is why Eckhart says, the moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. you then begin to realize that there is a vast realm of intelligence beyond thought. That thought is only a tiny aspect of that intelligence. And you start to now recognize more and more what that watcher actually is. And your sense of self now starts to shift from mind, from the thinker, to the watcher of the thinker. Not only does this bring greater mental mastery, mental control, it also brings greater acknowledgement of being, of what you actually are. That is freedom from mind. That is freedom from the phenomenality of the world, of the physical, where everything is coming and going. If we are identified with mind, we are also identified with what is always coming and going. Therefore, we always feel fear, anxiety, because we are identified as a temporary little isolated fragment, not recognizing that we are that which observes this. And that which observes this is whole, is one. It is qualityless. It is birthless and deathless because it has no form. That is the discovery that dawns on us from within, deeper and deeper and deeper, the more we start watching the thinker and letting go of identification with the thinker. Another word for meditation, self-inquiry. And he says you also, so my last point here, before we cut off today's video, because clearly I haven't even been a little bit through chapter 1 and I'm already on 28 minutes or so. So he says, you realize that all the things that truly matter, beauty, love, creativity, joy, inner peace, arise from beyond the mind. You begin to awaken. So all these things that you are chasing by trying to achieve things or create things like happiness, joy, love, inner peace are actually innate qualities inseparable from the observer, the watcher, awareness, being. They are a part of what you already are. They are what make up what you already are. This isn't some like fancy language to make you feel more motivated to do this. It is simply something that can be put to the test right now. You need nothing to be happy and peaceful. You need something. You need thought. You need a perception of an external world object that you're interpreting to be bad. You need that to be sad, upset, to have fear. Once you start to recognizing you are that, you start to recognize that you are that watcher, you are that that felt being, that presence. Your experience becomes, it's fully available just with love, with peace, to greater and greater degrees, in proportion to your recognition of your true self. So that is the journey that we're starting with this book, The Power of Now. To shift from mind to presence. Okay? So I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you really did and you want me to go further, we've only been through this much and we'll still go through this much. If you want me to continue making these sorts of breakdowns on this book, I'm also going to be doing another book soon. Let me know in the comment section below, okay? Obviously, if you want to work with me personally in my program, and you want to discover your true nature through self-inquiry, get my personal help to do so, then check the program details down below and schedule a call. But other than that, I will see you in the next breakdown or the next video. And I hope you have a great day. Subscribe to this channel for more. Have a good one.